welcome to the Daily Allegory through astrological divination. In a quiet corner of Pennsylvania where scandals are usually muffled and buried, a long-standing circle of practitioners finds itself haunted not by ghosts, but by the weight of its own choices, schemes that they carried out, plots they entertained, and valuables and records that they stole or helped steal. Until the past turns predator and begins hunting them in broad daylight. Sorry, I got a dog hair in my mouth. Arlo. As missing evidence resurfaces in the form of original documents, ledgers, and forgotten contracts, forensic detectives painstakingly analyze ink, paper, and signatures, following a trail of handwriting and intent that leads unavoidably back to the source and exposes what becomes one of the largest local scams anyone can possibly remember. With each revelation, the group's influence collapses and a community watches decades of quiet crimes unravel into a public reckoning, culminating in a catastrophic spiritual backfire as a legendary high priest, feared for his bloodline ties to the Anunnaki of old lore, invokes God the Most High, aided by the spirits of Solomon, Visago, and Agaris, and empowered through the fifth pentacle of Mars and the first through seventh pentacles of the Sun, to strip the practitioners of every gift they once wielded, leaving them rendered immobile, empty to power, and exposed to the same truth that they spent years trying to sweep under the rug. Today's story is called The Ledger of Light. In that part of Pennsylvania where trees stood close and the neighbors stood closer, the town survived on a kind of practiced forgetting. People smiled through rumors, waved at funerals, and kept their eyes trained on weather and football while the real storms were handled quietly. Back rooms, handshakes, church basements, and don't ask favors paid in casserole dishes in silence. It was a place where the past didn't die, it just simply learned to whisper. And for a long time, a certain group of practitioners lived very comfortably inside of that whisper, protected by the town's habit of sweeping and the steady conviction that nothing truly evil could survive in a place this ordinary, so ordinary. They told themselves that it wasn't theft, it was reallocation. Documents moved hands, land titles misfiled, inheritances redirected, grant funds rerouted, evidence planted in the right drawer at the right time. They didn't always do it directly. Sometimes they only advised, hinted, blessed the plan, or stood in the room while somebody else signed. But their thoughts had weight, their intentions had fingerprints, and in a town that feared confrontation, they became the invisible architects of outcomes. The scam wasn't a single act. It was a culture, decades of small crimes linked like paper clips. Like steel paper clips. Each one easy to deny. Each one another coin dropped in a jar labeled, "We deserve this." And then the jar cracked. It started with an envelope no one admitted to sending. Thick, unmarked, left on a detective's desk like a dare. Inside were original documents that shouldn't have existed anymore. Old property deeds, handwritten affidavits, notarized forms with seals that had gone missing years ago. Ledgers whose ink had aged the way guilt does, darker around the edges. The detective, nameless and stubborn, didn't believe in hauntings, only patterns. Pattern recognition was his only tool. He didn't care about the town's reluctance to look. He had Sun and Aquarius energy, cold clarity, an obsession with systems, mind wired to pry open the machinery people prayed would stay shut. He took the documents to forensic analysts who treated paper like a crime scene. Fiber analysis, ink dating, pressure impressions, signature morphology, stroke rhythm. They didn't just compare handwriting, they compared hesitation. And you can always see hesitation because everybody has a hesitant stroke in the rhythm of their signature that cannot be duplicated. Tiny tremors where a person lied to themselves and the pen had to follow. So they didn't just compare handwriting, they compared the hesitation. Signatures began to talk. They told the story of a scam that had fed on the quiet. Forged approvals, backdated transfers, altered wills, accidental clerical errors that always benefited the same shadowed circle. Crazy how that works. It wasn't one trail, but many, and as the detective stitched them together, the map formed a familiar shape. A long-standing group of practitioners who had been treated like local saints, blessing houses, counseling couples, offering protection, whispering prayers over newborns, while quietly pulling strings that tightened around everyone else's throats. Their power wasn't just spiritual, it was social. They had Sun conjunct Venus in the fourth, control of home, family, reputation, smiling behind lace curtains while they rewrote who belonged to what. They had Sun conjunct Mercury in the third, words as weapons, gossip as currency, turning conversations into contracts. Sun conjunct Mars in the fifth, risk-taking, thrill, performance, trading manipulation like a form of art, if you will. All is fair in the art of war, though. And above it all, Sun conjunct Pluto in the 10th, public dominance, hidden authority, power that didn't ask permission because it had never been challenged before, until now. And as the case grew, the group began to unravel psychologically. Not because they were being arrested at first. That threat was only a rumor, but because the past started arriving in ways that felt too personal. A filing cabinet at the courthouse jammed, then popped open all on its own, spilling copies of papers that were supposed to be destroyed, but weren't. A retired clerk woke screaming from dreams of ink bleeding through her palms. A man who'd once helped misplace a deed found his hand cramping whenever he tried to sign his own name, the fingers locking as if refusing to cooperate with lies anymore. One of the practitioners, known for speaking in gentle certainties, a word witch, if you will, looked into a mirror and saw not a face, but a stack of documents behind her eyes, page after page, like a verdict. It was the sun square moon in the second, identity at war with security. The town's hunger for comfort, money, status, colliding with the truth they'd buried to keep those things. They'd taken what wasn't theirs because it made them feel safe. And everybody likes to feel safe, right? Now, safety itself had turned against them. The detective followed the trail with a kind of merciless grace. The sun trine Uranus to the 8th, sudden revelation, hidden wealth, secret crimes cracked open by an unexpected bolt. Every new signature match tightened the loop. Arlo, come here. He's getting pretzels. Sorry, guys. Every recovered document closed another exit. The practitioners tried to counter it the way they'd counter everything. With rituals, with influence, with threats. They were made soft. This way they weren't taken too serious and could be overlooked if they didn't know what they were looking at. They lit candles that sputtered. They drew circles that wouldn't hold. They prayed and felt nothing answer. And in the quiet hours when the town slept and their mind could no longer hide behind performance, they were visited by the worst hauntings of all. Memories of what they'd done, what they'd almost done, what they wanted to do. Each thought returning like a letter stamped, return to sender. They began to realize the investigation wasn't just legal, it was also spiritual. A man arrived from elsewhere when the story hit a point in the town that could no longer swallow. No name was shared, no biography offered. He entered like a pressure change, like weather coming in. Those who still had sensitivity felt it immediately, something older than local tradition, something with the hard stillness of a starlit stone. He didn't ask to be believed. He didn't need the town's permission to exist. He didn't need anyone's permission to exist. They called him a high priest. But the word felt too small. And he moved as if he carried a kind of lineage that stretched past churches, past temples, past language, tied by rumor to Anunnaki lore, to old gods that lived in a negative space between the stars, the old gods of the sky. People expected a show. He didn't offer any. Aquarius doesn't posture, though. It only proves. He asked for the documents. He didn't touch them with bare hands. He laid them out like a body on a table and began to build a geometry of truth around them. The fifth pinnacle of Mars to bind violence and return harm to its source. The 7 pentacles of the sun to expose deception, illuminate hidden things, and strip false authority of its disguise. The paper seemed to brighten under the symbols, as if relieved to be seen. The air in the room tightened, and the practitioners who came to watch watching like people do when they hope they can control what they witness, felt their stomachs drop as if gravity itself had suddenly changed. "You hid behind quiet," the high priest said, voice calm as a locked door. "You hid behind reputation. You hid behind God's name while doing work that fed on theft." They tried to speak, but the words came out wrong, garbled, stuttering, slipping away as soon as they formed. Sun sextile chiron, the wound that became the opening. Truth hurt, truth healed, and truth cut. He called assistance, not with theatrics, but with precision. Solomon's authority like a seal pressed into wax. Visago to reveal what was hidden and return what was lost. Agaris to shake foundations, to topple what had been falsely established. The room felt suddenly crowded, not with bodies, but with presence. Presence behind the ears, heat at the back of the neck, the sensation of being watched by something that just doesn't blink. Outside the town gathered without meaning to. People stood on the porches, in parking lots, at the edge of church lawns as if drawn by an invisible tide. The North Node, Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces, the karmic current, the reckoning, the dissolving of illusion, rolled through the community like fog that refused to be ignored. Rumors started becoming confessions. Denials become sobbing apologies. Old grudges surfaced alongside old receipts. The scam that had lived as a whisper now became a roar. And that's when the backfire began to roll in. Not as an explosion, not lightning, something worse. Stillness. Like the calm before the storm. One by one, the practitioners felt their gifts, whatever they'd claim as power, simply stop responding. It's like phone calls cut off from a network, like a radio turned to dead air. They tried to scry and saw only themselves. They tried to chant and tasted ash. They tried to move energy through their hands and found their hands suddenly heavy, numb, and reluctant to obey. Some collapsed into chairs trembling. Others stood and realized their knees wouldn't bend. Their fingers wouldn't curl, their bodies turning into monuments to their own choices. The town watched it happen in plain sight. Public spectacle now. Horror blooming into belief. These weren't private consequences anymore. This was public spiritual collapse, an exorcism of entitlement. "In the name of God the Most High," the high priest said, and the words were not religious decorations, they were law. "What was taken will return, what was plotted will be revealed, what was done in secret will stand now in the light." The practitioners tried to scream, but the sound died at the edge of their throats. The room filled with a brightness that didn't come from bulbs or windows, a sun that wasn't in the sky, but in the spine of reality itself. Aquarius rationale and Pluto depth. Exposing every hidden mechanism. Their minds flooded with the evidence they'd try to erase. Signatures, dates, faces, stolen moments, stolen property, stolen futures. They felt with brutal clarity the exact point where each decision had now become a chain. And then, like a final mercy or a final punishment, the haunting ended, not because they were forgiven, but because there was nothing left to haunt. The gifts were gone, the influence was gone, the town's long habit of quiet was now gone. What remained was a row of living statues, eyes open, lungs working, minds trapped in the echo of their choices, while the forensic detective carried the now clean trail to court, and the community, finally forced to look, watched the biggest scandal in local memory unfold under fluorescent lights and Sunday stares. Later, after the cameras left and the paper stopped printing updates, people would argue about what actually really happened. Some would call it coincidence, law catching up, old age, hysteria possibly. Others would say they saw symbols shimmer on the documents as if the ink itself had become a holy doctrine. But everyone agreed on one detail and one detail alone, spoken quietly, because even now the town preferred whispering. When the high priest packed away the pentacles, he didn't look relieved. He looked disappointed, as if he hoped humans would stop needing consequence to recognize what conscience had been trying to say all along. And in that courtroom, sealed behind evidence tapes, the recovered documents sat in the boxes like sleeping witnesses, silent, heavy, and never so patient. Because paper never forgets, and neither does the light. We're going to end this with the invocation of the Ledger of Light. In the name of God the Most High, source of all measure, flame behind the sun, witness behind the veil, let what was hidden made be legible. Let what was crooked be made straight. Let what was swallowed by silence return with the voice. I opened a ledger of light, not a book of paper, but a record of choosing, of deeds done, deeds planned, deeds almost done, and every theft carried by hand, by thought, by consent. Let ink remember, let fiber testify, let signatures confess what maths denied. Sun in Aquarius clear, unbribable eye, stand into mind and burn away confusion. Sun conjunct Mercury in the third, let words become evidence. Sun conjunct Venus in the fourth, let homes reveal what was taken from them. Sun conjunct Mars in the fifth, let courage rise where fear performed. Sun trine Uranus in the eighth, split the vault, shake the hidden record. Sun conjunct Pluto in the 10th, expose power that fed on secrecy. Sun sextile Chiron, let the wound open into truth, not denial. And Sun square Moon in the 2nd, where hunger warred with conscience, be reconciled by consequence in clean light. Stellium of Venus, Mercury, Sun, Pluto, Mars and Aquarius align. Make the mind a beam, the voice a blade, the verdict unavoidable. Stellium of North Node, Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces rise. Wash illusion from the eyes, bind karma to its source, dissolve the fog that let decades pass unchallenged. Now I call the assistant powers by lawful remembrance. Solomon, keeper of command, set the seal upon deceit. Visago, revealer, bring forth the lost originals, the buried pages, the missing proof. Agaris, shaker of foundations, let false structures tremble and fall. By the 5th pentacle of Mars, bind malice, bind intimidation, bind into retaliation. Let every harm be halted at the threshold and return to its sender as lesson, not plague. By the 1st through 7th pentacles of the sun, ignite illumination in every drawer, every archive, every sealed box. Let the true documents surface. Let the true path show. Let false authority be stripped of its costume. Let the guilty be revealed without guesswork, as surely as a lamp reveals fingerprints. I speak to the trails, the dates, the seals, the signatures. Run backward to the source. I speak to the town that learned to look away. Turn your face to the light. I speak to the circle that trafficked in quiet crimes. Be still and now be known. In the name of God Most High, I command, what was stolen will return in full measure. What was plotted will be uncovered in full clarity. What was buried will rise without mercy and without mistake. Let gifts used to be deceived be relinquished. Let power gained by harm become ash in the hands. Let the living remain living, but let the lie be rendered immobile. So the ledger is opened, so the light is written, so the truth stands up in public and does not sit down. With the power I embody, let this law be declaration of law, whispered that underlies law. And so it is. That's all I have for you guys today.